It's the Personnel Committee for Wednesday, February 16th. Councilmember Dennis Zine, joined by Councilmember Paul Koretz. And Mr. Park's status today? He will not be here. So we do have a quorum. We have 5 items on the agenda. And let's begin with number 1, please.
The mayor has submitted a memorandum. This has to do with the re-exemption of one assistant general manager for the housing department. This has a time limit, and it is scheduled for council consideration this Friday, the 18th.
Okay.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, Councilmember Koretz. My name is Rushmore Cervantes with the Housing Department, and as was stated, the department is seeking the authority to re-exempt an assistant general manager position that became vacant December 31st of last year. And this is a critical position that it oversees all the administrative functions of the department, which includes grants management, accounting, systems, and personnel. And we seek your approval.
How many assistant general managers does the department have?
The department has 3 assistant general manager positions, 1 executive officer position, and general manager.
So it has a GM, and then what was the next one?
Executive officer and 3 assistant general managers.
Okay. And this would be one of the 3?
That is correct.
Okay. How many employees total?
Regular and resolution, approximately 631 positions.
Okay. And where are you in the budget?
The department is entirely special funded, and at this point,
But you have a
the
surplus,
department.
or are you up, down, or?
I think that, well, right now, we're at break-even point, a little above break-even point. There are some concerns going into the remainder of this program year, going into next program year relative to the Community Development Block Grant as it relates to what is going on in the federal government. Everyone's waiting to see what the outcomes are of the continuing resolution, which expires March 3rd, and what cuts there will be, of any, relative to Community Development Block Grant.
What happens when those are cut? Because the president's recommended modifications on a federal level, and then the state, we know what's going on with the governor. So what happens if you're cut a substantial amount? What happens?
Well, it'll become a domino effect, Councilman. The department, not only the housing department, but all CDBG grant recipients are going through the same exercises of going through, coming up with different scenarios of what these potential cuts could be. The department was, as it was preparing for the consolidated plan, came up with cuts of 8% that were submitted to the mayor's office, and then there's other scenarios that take us up to 15 to 25%, and depending on where the cuts come, there could be cuts in potential services and/or staff.
So you're preparing for the possibility?
We have to be prepared for the possibility, depending on what number comes in. This is going to be mid-program year that'll hit this program year going into next, so that means that with the contracts that we have in place with our service providers would be impacted as well.
I know it's not a positive picture, but we must be prepared for it.
Correct.
This is an exempt position?
Yes, it is, Councilman.
So then it would be one of the ones that possibly would go in the event of people leaving. The span of 631 reduces to 300.
Well, if that were the case, that we would be looking across the board cuts up and down, as well as left and right.
Mr. Kretz?
Well, to follow up on what you just said, should we be filling this position now, or should we be keeping an eye out on what happens in the near future in terms of budgeting?
Well, if anything, Councilman, this particular position would be one of the most critical, in that this is the position that oversees all of the backbone of the department relative to administration, budgeting, and that position is required, no matter what's the budget scenario looks like, funding scenarios, we're going to have to be able to manage with a surplus, or we have to manage with a deficit, and we've got to be able to ensure that we've got the expert staff there to be able to oversee those operations.
So this is a key position that
Absolutely.
your department thinks they can't do without either way.
That is correct, Councilman.
And this other person left, when did the other person leave?
December 31st, 2010.
Okay. They take an ERIP?
No, the person moved on to an opportunity outside the city.
Okay. And how long have they been with the city?
That person had worked for the city for 7 years.
Okay. All right, with the understanding that, you know, you may get cut.
It's a reality that we certainly understand, and we're preparing for it as necessary.
Your pool of candidates, where's that come from?
This is an exempt position, so we'll reach from within the city and out and try to identify the best candidate possible to assist us.
Yes, it was already authorized as an exempt, and we're going to maintain that exemption for that special qualification.
Correct.
Okay.
Move the item.
All right, you've got that one position. Good luck to you.
Thank you, Councilman.
Let's go to number 2.
The city administrative officer in the housing department has submitted reports. This has to do with the status of the homelessness prevention and rapid rehousing program and related actions, including an accountant position. The Housing Committee, Housing Community and Economic Development Committee has recommended approval of the city administrative officer's recommendations.
Okay.
Councilman, I'm not certain you want an update on the program itself or go right into the specifics as the reason why it was referred to this committee, and that is regarding the utilization of accounting services.
Well, my concern when it was brought to my attention is we have city employees who have gotten the pink slip, city employees who are on furloughs, city employees who are looking for any kind of work, along with the private sector, and I'm questioning why we go to an employment agency versus somebody who was with the city family, because when we go to an employment agency, the employment agency takes a finder's fee, whatever that is, I don't know. So I'm concerned is why are we going outside when we don't know we've got city employees in a number of categories that would jump to take any kind of position, whether it's full-time, part-time, temporary. That's my question. Why are we going to outside city family when we got a reservoir of city employees that have, I'm sure, these and other qualifications?
Couple of things, Councilman. This is a short-term grant. This is ARA dollars that will expire September 2012. The amount of money that's been allocated for the purposes of accounting is less than what would take to finance or provide funding for a regular city employee if you factor in both the salaries and the related costs. By not filling it with a city employee, we are also then reducing the amount of obligation to the pension fund. I just will also indicate to you, Councilman, that in many instances, city staff are not going to be taking positions such as this, even if it were a regular position, because the short-term funding. The department itself has experienced this not only with accounting positions, but even upwards of senior management analyst 2 positions. Unless an employee has actually received a pink slip from another department, they're not going to move to the housing department or any other department where it's funded with stimulus dollars or short-term grant funds, because they're concerned if they transfer to that department, into that new position, that when come layoffs and the bumping rights take place, they're on the short end. So they do not accept those positions. So even if we were theoretically had enough money to be able to finance or had enough money for 2 years for an accountant position, the likelihood of getting an accountant that has not received a pink slip from another department to accept this position is very slim. And this way we're able to, through the use of the contract, we're able to minimize the overall cost of the grant and provide more services to the community.
Well, do you have accountants in the department?
Yes, we do.
Are those on furloughs?
No, they are not.
None of them?
No.
So why couldn't we pay them overtime to do this?
The council,
Money.
Councilman, the staff are taxed as it is, working on the existing programs they have. They are dedicated funding sources for that. So the better from our position, to managing the staff, managing the workflow, would to carve out a small amount of money for contractual services, rather than putting the burden on existing staff for a 2-year period.
Well, I'm not convinced that we can't get out of the city workforce somebody who will do this work. And what's the cost when you go to the part-time accountant, when you go to the employment agency? What is the administrative cost on that?
I'm not familiar with the actual contract itself with accountants, Councilman.
I'd like to know what that is, because I'm sure that the agency receives a handsome sum of money.
Well, Councilman, again, I go back to the amount of money that we have available to provide for salaries. If in fact we were to shift the monies from the contractual services line item to salaries, there isn't sufficient monies to cover the salaries for an accountant position. Then we'd have to go through the selection process, and there's honestly, I don't know that we'd get anyone to transfer based on experience we've had with other positions.
What about overtime?
Again, Councilman, if you're providing overtime for staff that are already assigned to do other work for other grants, the idea is to have a dedicated accountant for this position.
Part-time.
This is full.
Part-time accountant.
This is full-time.
Well, it says part-time. A part-time accountant for the program. Requesting exemption to hire, manage hiring, approve 25,000 for the student worker program, which is separate. To hire an employee, to hire from an employee agency a part-time accountant. So if I'm seeing part-time.
I stand corrected.
If you're hiring a part-time accountant, I don't know why someone wouldn't want to do some overtime. They're already city employee. We're not going to pay an additional cost. I can't buy it. So I'm not going to support going to a temporary agency, paying a temporary agency. We got a reservoir of city employees that would like to have additional income to pay their bills with the looming threat that some people may not be employed as the budget deepens. Mr. Koretz?
Yeah, I agree, unless you make the effort and you're not able to find anybody that could do the work under that circumstance, I'd rather see us go in that direction.
Excuse me, council members. Angelica Samayoa with the CAO's office. Shortly before this item came to committee today, we did have some conversation with the department to talk about whether or not there were any other options. If there was a concern about hiring an accountant from the contractual services process. The cost of an accountant, city workforce at step one at the entry level would be $47,900 approximately, and that does not include related costs. So we would have to add 38% to that amount. Cost-wise, it would be less expensive to hire assuming a full-time accountant. The cost would be a little bit greater to hire an employee. But another option is to go through the as-needed process. If the department were allowed to hire an as-needed account from the different account, they're considered city workforce, but they're temporary, and they don't add a pension burden like a full-time employee. There's not a related cost amount attached to that. The department does not have a related cost obligation, so there's not a general fund hit in that route. Well, I think it's an option that staff had considered and felt that that would be a manageable option that they would be willing to try, because it is temporary. So anyone who accepts that position is not necessarily someone who would be in that transfer position. As Mr. Cervantes mentioned, it's a different pool of people who would be looking at that opportunity, who would not be feeling that they're going to lose seniority or status. But to do that, the department currently does not have authority to hire as needed employees. But if this committee wanted to or wished to, you could recommend on an interim basis. Well, okay, maybe you disagree. But I do want to say that if you wanted to go that route, there could be a recommendation to authorize employment authority for the department to add an accountant classification to their as-needed authorities, which we could then look at as part of the budget process, add it to their departmental personnel ordinance as something that they can have for next fiscal year. And it's a temporary assignment that is only there to the extent that the department needs that person and to the extent that there's funding for that person. So the commitment level is less.
Traditionally, the accounting series and hiring accountants, good qualified accountants, has been a challenge. In this last round of layoffs, no accountants were laid off. In fact, we lost so many people in the accounting series as a result of ERIP that the controller is now bringing back retirees. So
Why can't we put one of those folks in?
There may or may not be anyone who is
You don't have to pay them
available.
pension benefits. You don't have to pay them medical benefits. They're already retired, collecting a pension.
That's
And if they're
correct.
part-time.
I just am not sure that the
I just can't-
controller has.
I cannot see going out to a
No, they're
temp
90-day returnees,
But 90 days.
90 days.
What do we pay the temp firm? What's their overhead, the temp firm? Hello?
On the temp, it's just the part-time savings plan for the,
What do we pay a temp firm if we go hire somebody from a temp firm?
oh, from a temp
What
firm,
is their
that,
bounty on it?
then,
have that number.
Angelica, do you know?
I don't have that number.
We need to know that number, and I think that number would be staggering.
But
I know private sector folks that use temp firms.
bringing back retired employees that can only address the problem for 90 days.
Okay. Well, by that time, February, March, April, May, and maybe we'll know where we are as the budget and where we go deeper in the hole or we start coming out of the hole. But I'm not gonna support going to a private temp firm, period. So we could debate that till doomsday, but I'm not gonna change my mind.
Just as a point of clarification, the 90 days actually can be spread over 720 hours. So it doesn't have to be consecutive 90
Because
days.
you're talking about part-time, so it could be
It-
many hours.
No, it equates to 720 hours, 90 hours times 8 hours a day, 720. So you don't have to necessarily, it wouldn't necessarily take you to April, depending on how many hours the
So it could-
90-day worked. It could take you through September if they're not working every day.
So if they're working 4 hours a day or 5 hours a day or whatever the case may be.
Correct.
Do you have anything else on that before we move along? Because I'm gonna deny it. Mr. Fritz.
No, I think we're in sync on this.
All right.
Oh.
So let's go to the next one, since we're not going to grant that one. Find some other way to go to city folks.
So what you're doing for clarification purposes and for the record is you're disapproving the CAO recommendations?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
And there's some other positions there. Are they part of this? The student, huh? Okay.
That's what I was trying to suggest.
Phyllis,
The position, accountant position, that was it, then student worker, how about the project coordinator procedure? Okay. So the only one we have is a student worker? So we're denying the accountant position. And as far as the student worker,
And I assume we're encouraging staff to explore the other options that we just discussed.
yes, we are.
Councilman, if I may, on that item number 2, if...
Student worker?
No, I'm sorry. You're on number 3. Excuse me, I was trying to go back. to
It's
number
part of number
It is,
two.
okay.
Item
If,
number 2, please.
if it is the committee's choice not to go with the contracts, and it is desired for us to look at as needed as an option, if we may ask that this committee move forward with the transmittal amended by this committee that would authorize the department through as needed to look to secure accounting services in that manner?
Yeah, I'd make that part of the motion. Why not?
We can qualify that. Ms. Gibson, you look puzzled.
Well, my only concern was the previous action that you were denying the CAO recommendation.
Right.
The CAO has a series of recommendations, and that issue with regard to the accountant is only related to item, recommendation number 1.
Right.
So it would seem that, you know, with Rush's request, the amendment would be to amend recommendation number 1.
Correct, yes.
Okay.
Also, the 90-day,
Yeah, the 90,
or as needed and 90-day are two different possibilities.
I think it would better serve the department with the as needed.
there's definitely options. There are options. You can tell your fellow general managers that this committee is not going to be supporting temps outside the city family. Right? I mean, that's definitely something I think we're very committed to.
I believe we got the message.
You got that message? Okay.
Okay, so for the record, the amended recommendation is to go ahead and move the item forward with the amendment to recommendation number 1. And ask the department to explore the 90-day and the as-needed component.
And not to use a temporary agency or employment agency or temporary agency.
Got it.
Okay. I mean, I feel for people looking for work on the outside, but we got to take care of our city family first.
Thank you, Councilman.
All right. And then the other one, the student professional worker, that's okay?
Yeah.
All right, that's fine, on the student worker professional. Number 3, please.
Your motion and Mr. Cardenas asking the personnel department
Excellent motion, if I must admit.
asking the Personnel Department to report relative to a request for the designation of up to 15 parking spaces in the P4 level of City Hall East. This will be for the use of Office of Public Safety police officers assigned to the Civic Center and Day Watch. The Personnel Department has submitted a report in response to your motion.
Let's hear from Donald Taylor before we hear from the city folks. Mr. Taylor,
Good afternoon.
are you armed?
Not at this time,
All
sir.
right, I see that badge, and I want to make sure I'm safe.
You are always safe.
I got the man in the back protecting me
Well, they're with me, sir.
from you.
How are you today?
Good.
I just wanted to give a little background on the parking situation for GSD officers in the city of LA. Every police officer in the city of Los Angeles is afforded parking at their station, free parking at their station, whether it be LAPD, airport police, or port police. Here at the Department of General Services, because we're here in the dense Civic Center area, we are not afforded that same luxury. Our officers have to park on off-site parking in the same lots that we carry out a lot. We take a lot of suspects, burglaries from motor vehicles, theft suspects, whatever you have in those lots. We police those lots, and we have to park in those lots at the same time. Some of those lots are 3, 4, 5 blocks away, with our officers carrying their war bags with all their equipment, gun belts, ammo, riot gear, you name it, on their back, walking. They've been recognized by some of the suspects that we have jailed and have gotten out of jail. Our officers walk right past them with their war bags, and they, "Hi, officer." You know, they know us, they see us. We park next to the vehicles that we have to write reports on that have been burglarized. It puts us in a catch-22 a lot. We have to now come to the building. We can't get into the building to police it at this time. During 9/11, our force was a lot smaller. The tragedy of 9/11, someone had the foresight to give us all 24-hour parking permits. Now that we've grown a lot larger than we were, we still need access to the buildings that we police. We don't have the access that we need. The guys transfer. We do not get overtime now, so they're asked to adjust their hours. When they do adjust their hours, they can't get into the building to police it. So we are definitely asking that you consider this. I don't think the report addresses our special needs as a police force, our parking needs for the Civic Center area.
How many hundred spaces do you want?
Sir, we want up to the 15 spaces for our...
Only 15?
Yes, for our newer officers to be able to enter the facility to police it properly.
So you're only looking for 15 places?
And we're not even asking for free parking, sir.
You mean you're willing to pay?
We're willing to pay.
Well, that's a change from other people. How many parking spaces do they have available? I mean, how many are there in total?
Well, the parking spaces on P4, from what we see on a daily basis, there are more than enough spaces to provide us parking.
Do we have a number? Like
Well,
100,
with-
200,
with-
300, 1,000, 4,000, I don't know.
With-
I think
with-
Personnel Department's in a better position to report on the number of
How about
spaces.
2,299? How about 2,299? Well, I want to hear from him before we go into the meat of it. So out of 2,299, you're looking for 15 spaces that you're willing to pay for.
Yes.
You know, we have some other parking lots that we'd like to lease out for 50 years. You interested in those?
Sir, I need a part-time job, sir.
What do you think about that, Zima? We scrubbed that idea today, so let's bring it back.
Yeah, try something else.
Okay, so I understand what the position is. So you park your car off-site in a city lot or a private lot?
Private lot.
And then you carry all your gear to, where's your?
Our station is here at City Hall East, our locker rooms.
Okay, so City Hall East, go down there, suit up, then you go to work.
Right.
And then when your shift's over, you walk back to your car
Exactly.
and get in your car and take off.
Right past the same suspects that we FI on a daily basis that we run for wants and warrants, that we carry out of the parking lots for different crimes, for drug use, you name it. Yeah, we're right in the midst of it.
Do you ever see those folks in jumpsuits around 5 o'clock that are walking on First Street, eastbound on First Street, past City Hall? They're wearing jumpsuits, different colored jumpsuits.
No, I'm not sure who you're referring to.
Well, those are the folks that get released from the court every day.
Oh, well, definitely. They
They're
end
in
up
jumpsuits. You ever see them?
they end up in the mall at breakfast coffee
I see them
time.
when I go home sometimes.
Yes.
It's a whole bunch of, they're different color, different days. And
Yeah.
the LA County,
Oh, yeah.
they'll release them from the courthouse. So you could encounter those folks as you're walking in your car.
Oh, we do encounter them, yes.
Okay. All right, well, you have any other comments before we go to the staff?
Well, no, but I'd like to stay seated here to address anything that I might disagree with.
Counterpoint. Okay.
Yes.
All right. You're lucky he's being nice today.
Good afternoon. My name's Alex Vasquez. I'm with the Personnel Department. We prepared a report at council's request in response to questions raised in the motion. If you'd like, I can go through the report, but basically we're providing an accounting of the parking permits issued in City Hall East. We've briefly gone over the criteria used to determine eligibility for parking permits. We've given a snapshot listing of the parking spaces available. And then we also touched upon the request to designate the 15 parking spaces on P4 for the GSD police officers.
Do we go lower than P4 or is that the bottom?
I'm sorry?
P4, is that the lowest level?
Yes,
So P1, 2, 3, okay.
yes. But,
Out of 2,000, I see the final version on your report says to receive and file and send a consideration to the Joint Labor Committee.
yes, basically the Personnel Department is responsible for issuing employee parking permits, but that's done in accordance with the special MOU on parking. That MOU is negotiated through a Joint Labor Management Committee, specifically on commute options and parking. And there currently is an agreement with regard to that. And then on page 2 of the report, we basically outline the major provisions of the MOU with regard to how parking permits are issued. And they're issued based on this priority category. So if employees fall within these categories, they are issued permits.
Are there any Office of Public Safety folks that get permits?
Yes.
How many?
On page 4 of the report, we gave basically a summary of the number of GSD officers that are getting permits, but I need to make a correction. What we reported here was the total number of GSD security and police officers that are getting permits, so that's from rank and file all the way up. So we had...
What's that number?
68 total are getting what we call a rotating 24-hour permit. What's not on here is also there are 43 employees getting night permits. So that's, and one employee getting a seniority permit. So that's a total of 119.
Do you know
And
that?
then,
Sir, I'd like to
So if I could
address
just-
that.
All right, well,
I wanted to just make a correction because there, if you're looking at just police officers, GSD police officers, that number is much smaller. So I just want to correct that because we did indicate in the report that it was GSD police officers. So 29 police officers are getting the rotating or the 24-hour permits.
What,
And
29? Rotating?
Yes.
Okay.
And 25 are getting what we call the night permits. So that's a total of 54.
Okay. So why couldn't we take, so why do you need 15 more? Since you already have 54.
Sir, night permits do not begin to address our needs on day watch.
Okay, so the 29, where'd the 29 go?
The 29 permits are issued to those individuals that what we call rotating shifts, so half of their shifts are on day, half are on night. There's a special provision in the MOU that allows to, for employees who work, in a 24-hour position, for example, PSRs or such as the GSD officers, if they have half of their shifts day and half shifts night, then they can qualify for this rotating permit.
Do they pay for those?
Yes, they do, at a reduced amount.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to figure out, if you already have, why couldn't we take some of those, I don't know what the deployment is, why couldn't we take some of those in for the on-duty personnel? If the person's off, they still have a permit, who's parking in their spot if they're on a day off or vacation?
Well, we do, Phil, we do issue permits for the day, and the day shift is the peak shift, and that's the one that has the waiting list. And so most people have to have enough seniority to park there. Before, it used to be you had to have 25 years to be able to park in City Hall East. Due to EREP, that brought the seniority level down quite a bit. So now it's around 10 years of seniority that you have to get a day permit.
But what about the issue that the officer has, commuting, walking back and forth and parking off-site and all that? There's a condition that, about their safety and the safety of their vehicles and equipment, et cetera. How about that aspect?
Well,
And it was
without,
obviously considered
without
after
speaking,
September
I mean, I understand what he's saying. Unfortunately, we issue the permits according to the MOU. So that's something that has to, I believe, has to go back to the Joint Labor Management Committee if they want to bring that issue up. But this is something that was negotiated through that process. It's a meet and confer. Well, right now, at the...
Forget about the meeting first time. Are the
Yeah.
spots available there? That's the question I have.
I would say, when we took a snapshot, we have overall about a 4% vacancy rate, but we're constantly in the process, especially due to EREP, as people were leaving. We are in the process of filling those spots all the time. So there's currently over 500 people on the wait list for City Hall East. So when people started to get wind that we were getting down on that list, we have more people now requesting parking who want to park in City Hall East, so that list grows.
Okay, I understand that, but that list may shrink if the budget doesn't get resolved. Because there'll be fewer people who worry about the parking places. But those are probably the people with not a lot of seniority. So that wouldn't really impact the community's degree. What about the issue on the MOU that apparently expired in 2007? That the MOU that was on this matter, parking MOU expired June 2007?
That you and I negotiated way back when?
Is that with the fire department people with
Yeah,
Fire
it's
Station 4?
the MOU continues until superseded by a successor MOU, and it's right now, the successor MOU is pending before council, and
How'd you resolve that issue?
it's still pending. It's not actually resolved, and I think what sort of put it to the back burner or set it aside for the moment was the economic crisis and with the layoffs and the ERIP and
Other factors.
other factors were involved, and it needed to just be set aside for the moment, and we have to revisit it. But what we have done with other bargaining units that want to have something handled differently in the MOU, or for example, what the GSD police officers are requesting is basically to change the seniority lineup, is we invite them to come to the Joint Labor Management Committee, make a presentation. The management and union representatives of that committee then consider that proposal and entertain it in relation to other proposals or amendments or whatever. And right now, because we probably will be revisiting and tweaking the successor MOU that's pending before council, because the situation has changed, that's something that the committee can consider. I'm not promising any particular type of outcome, but because we do have a special parking MOU that governs seniority for parking permits, we can't go outside of that MOU. It has to be considered in that context. But we've done that
Mr. Chair, I'd like to make a motion that we encourage the Joint Labor Management Committee to look at making this a higher priority than seniority, and to consider providing them with the next 15 spaces that are
What I
available.
would do is we keep it in committee, we continue it in committee, so put a time frame on it so it wouldn't linger. Since this has lingered since 2007, it's been lingering for 3 years, so if we keep it in committee, we can get a report back on it. The other question I have is why 15?
That's fine.
Why not 20 or 25 or why this magic number of 15?
Apparently, they have 15 day watch officers.
Well, no, we just tried to keep it as a bare minimum, the least that we could possibly get away with. I'd like to add that we've never been invited to the table for the MOU. We've gone through several channels from the general manager, parking services, whoever we could contact to try to get invited to address our parking situation, to no avail. That's why we're here.
Here's what we're going to do. We're going to invite you formally from this committee to go to the table with the chair. Who's the chair?
Right now, who is the chair right now of the committee? I don't know, I'd have to look. The committee, it alternates between union and management. We have,
Okay.
but basically, this is a Brown Act committee. We send out the agenda. We can make sure that you're on the mailing list. Personnel Department staffs the committee. We will send you the agenda of the next time the committee meets, and you're welcome to come.
How often do they meet?
It depends, but it was once a month, every 2 months, depends when there's a quorum.
Okay, see, here's my concern. I don't want to drag this on forever, and I think Mr. Koretz has a good recommendation on this, but we want to keep it in this committee so we can get it resolved. So what I'd like to do is have it set for the next meeting for the joint labor management, and then within a month to a month and a half, and have it come back to this committee so we can
Yeah.
get some resolve on it, and hopefully you can get it done at the table. I've been dragging on this for a long time. I don't want to postpone it, but we do have some rules. Obviously, it's not critical nature, it's an issue of safety and concern. And it's been going on for obviously longer than it should have been. So why don't we make that recommendation, that it comes back to this committee within a month to a month and a half, hopefully they can convene a meeting, get that resolved. Since you're paying for it, so move Corette's motion, report back, next personnel. Well, it may not be done in 2 weeks.
Yeah.
So I'd say within.
I mean, we're also dependent on when there's a quorum and there's
Well,
been
let's
some.
expedite it so we can do it, but then, as soon as it's done, we meet here twice a month. You can report to Mr. Perry, and then we'll schedule it, and then we'll get it done, one way or another.
There's no action from this committee.
Pardon me?
There's no action from this committee yet specifically asking them to take that as a make that.
We're doing it right now. We're gonna make that
Well,
motion.
you hold the item here, you need to at least move that forward, and then you can certainly always schedule it anytime you want.
Well,
Why can't we take that action? We can still hold it here.
they're at the table, the CEO is here, and they're being instructed to put on the agenda. I would assume that you can do that.
And then report back with the
No,
results.
we could either put it on the agenda or it would be during public comment.
No, put it on the
That,
agenda.
Certainly want to put it on the agenda.
We will testify, you and I will testify.
yeah, okay, so we'll add the item to the
Be happy
agenda, and
to
the
go.
next time the committee meets, we'll make sure you receive a copy of the agenda, and you can come make a presentation to the Joint Labor Management Committee. Because the Joint Labor Management Committee is what negotiates the special parking MOU. And as Councilman Zine stated, that's the parameters we have to work with. That's what's in effect now. And,
Okay, I'd like to say the same rules existed when 9/11 hit, and we were magically given parking at that time because of the crisis. We still have a crisis at hand.
there was an MOU amendment. I have a copy here I could show you. In 2001, and I was involved at that time, we amended the special parking MOU to add both a reduced rate for rotating shifts. There were a couple changes that happened in that same amendment. And so that affected not just GSD police officers, which at that time were part of SEIU. It also was for the PSRs, and there were other entities. But there were actually 3 changes, I believe, that were made to the MOU at that time that was voted on by the Joint Labor Management Committee, and a formal special parking MOU amendment was executed.
Okay.
So, it's been dragging on for a long time, And then when did they rescind what they permitted on September 11th? When was that rescinded?
Well, our officers that were here at the time do have, they have been able to maintain their 24-hour permits. It's more for our newer officers that have come since the merger and the beginning of OPS that can't get into the building. We have...
What do you mean you can't get in? How are they not getting in the building?
Sir, we do not, there's parking services at the access points to City Hall East, and if you do not have a permit, they will not let you in, cop, firefighter,
Won't let you
whoever.
park.
Exactly.
You can walk in, though.
Well, yes, anyone can walk in, but,
Yeah, I couldn't understand the
yeah,
non-access.
your vehicle,
Vehicle can't get in,
Yeah.
okay. All right, so let's do that. Let's follow the rules at this particular stage, that it'll go to the Labor Committee, Joint Labor Action, get it done, come back here, and that'll be the direction from this committee. Correct, Mr. Perez?
Absolutely.
And then hopefully you can get it resolved at that committee, and if we're available, we'll go testify as to the urgency, and then we come back. Is that okay, Zena? Could we do that? So we could go there and plead the case and then come here and rule on the case. That's a pretty good deal. Somehow it sounds good. So let's do it that way, and hopefully this will be done at the committee sooner than later. And since they're gonna pay, now they're gonna pay full rate or reduced rate? What do you want to pay?
sir, I'm not sure about what rate we pay. I think it's $30 bi-weekly, 32.
It's
$60 a month?
$15.81 per pay period for a
Is it?
24-hour permit,
It is what?
with $15.81 per pay period.
So if that is the rate, you know,
Yeah, without the tax. In the MOU for the rotating shift, it's 20, let's see, is this per,
The
this
rotating
is per
shift
month. It's
would-
$28.75 for the rotating shift, and the night permit is $11.50.
A month or a check?
But the day
Month.
shift, for the day shift, the individual permit is $46 a month.
How much?
$46 a
Is that
month.
what we're paying?
Yes.
I know we're paying some.
Yeah, you're paying $46 a month. These are monthly rates that are in the, and this is online on the CAO's website, the parking, special parking MOU. If you go to the bottom of where all the MOUs are listed, it's at the bottom there. You can access it online. But, yeah, so the monthly individual permit is $46. The rotating 24-hour permit at City Hall East is $28.75. And the night permit is $11.50. That's without the 10% parking tax, and that's on a monthly basis. What's pending before council are fee increases that would raise all these rates. But it hasn't been pending since 2007. The MOU expired in 2007, but it hasn't been pending before council that long. But between furloughs and layoffs,
I know it's confusing, it's constantly changing. Okay, so that'll be the direction, and,
thank you, sir.
thank you. Next item, please, number 4.
The city administrative officer has submitted a couple of reports. This has to do with resolution authorities approved by the city council and the mayor as part of the 2010-11 budget. This item is also referred to Budget and Finance Committee.
Hello.
Good afternoon, council members. Ben Ceja with the CAO. There were 2 reports that were requested we draft by the city council earlier this fiscal year. One was basically an identification of all resolution positions that are currently authorized as part of this year's budget. And that was the initial report where we identified what we consider all on-budget and off-budget resolution positions. And there were 2,230 of these resolution positions. In the original report, we provided a list by department of each one of those resolution positions. We also identified how many of those resolution positions were general funded, how many were special funded, how many were filled, and how many were vacant. Now, obviously, with normal attrition, the vacancy rate will change as, you know, people transfer in and out of departments, and some folks end up retiring or leaving the city for other reasons. So those attrition rates and vacancies and filled number of positions have changed since the first printing of this report. And as far as the resolutions positions, those remain the same because they're approved as part of the budget process. So this was informational reports. There were no recommendations being made in either of these reports. The only item that was, only policy considerations that were identified were the recent practice of approving resolution positions without funding. So for example, as the budget was being developed for this fiscal year, there were recommendations made to eliminate positions. Now, departments made efforts to keep those positions, and their claim was, leave us with the authority, and we would just take the funding away. So that created what was we refer to as unfunded resolution positions, which really have no, from our standpoint here at the CAO, real basis for existing. Typically, we would use substitute authority positions for that same, the same purpose that departments would otherwise have requested unfunded resolution positions.
Okay, so this is basically a review and a note and file, a receive and file. Note and file.
Yeah.
Any questions?
No.
Okay. Thank you, Ben.
No problem.
We will take note file number 4. Number 5.
The final item, this is the motion introduced by Mr. Rosendahl, second by Ms. Han, relative to the feasibility of permitting the Los Angeles Airport Police Athletics and Activities League to receive payroll deductions from current and retired city employees.
And to make a recommendation to, city attorney draft the ordinance, present in 30 days. Since no problem.
Concur? That seems like a no-brainer.
It is a no-brainer, that's why we did it that way. Okay.
And there are no public comments, so I believe this concludes the meeting.
3 o'clock sharp, perfect. Thank you. We are adjourned.